Irish mortgage holders in arrears. The idea of handing back the keys is often the only option people feel they have to free themselves from such a burden.
But before you push the keys through the letterbox, what's at stake?
For many people in mortgage arrears, throwing back the keys can seem like the only answer to their problems. But is it a realistic solution? And if you take that step, what can happen? The downside about throwing back the keys is it can take the bank a long time to even figure out that the property is empty, which means that you'll clock up maximum fees, you'll run up more arrears, and the eventual judgment against you will be even higher. To make things worse, you'll still need somewhere to live and you won't qualify for social housing. And personal insolvency might not be a choice because a precondition is engaging with the banks. Dealing with your banks when you can't pay your mortgage is hard, and if that type of relationship existed in any other part of your life, you'd be right to walk away. But in this instance, it creates more problems than it solves. So if you want to walk away, you would better keep walking. Instead, my advice is to talk to your bank. Ask them if you can sell for a loss. Ask them to cut a deal on the shortfall, and if they won't play ball, look to the new personal insolvency legislation for one of the solutions contained in that. That's another inside tip from the world of finance.
And Carl Dieter joins us now. Thanks for joining us, Carl.
It's a real case of don't do it.
Don't do it. You've listed all the negatives there. There must be a lot of people thinking about it and seriously considering it.
Well, there's a lot of people think about it, and in fact, there's a lot of people who do it, because if you look at the possession figures for last year, we have this idea that there was loads of repossessions, of actual repossessions, where the bank said, give us the property and we want it back, we demand it back. Last year there was less than 200. But the statistics show it as being far above that, because they also include voluntary possessions, which is where you negotiate with your bank, and abandonments, which is where you basically walk away. What I would say is, with abandonments, quite often you have people who move country or something to that effect is where you tend to see that kind of thing. Because if you plan on staying put and you abandon, you won't get on the social housing list. You can actually undo your ability to go for personal insolvency. So within the system, you can get more out of it than you can by just posting back the keys.
Is there a difference between unforced repossessions or voluntary repossessions and abandonment, as you say?
Yeah, a voluntary repossession will be where you say, listen, I can't pay this mortgage. I took it out and I used to be earning X amount, now I just can't pay for it. Will you let me sell it? That could be at a loss. Not every property that is going to be lost from the owner is actually a negative equity, but let's just say that it is. You come up with some kind of plan to deal with the shortfall, and then they sell the house and go from there. If you abandon, the bank might not even know that it's abandoned. It might take them 4 months, of sending people around to try and figure out. Meanwhile, you rack up more arrears. The fees that will be charged are the maximum. It's not something that you can negotiate. Like if you sell at a loss, you normally market the property. If the bank market the property, it's the maximum fees applied to everything. So it's really, it's the kind of thing that sometimes people emotionally feel that they want to do, but if you actually sit down and think about it, like there's lots of things in life that if you actually just went with what your heart felt, you do all sorts of crazy stuff, but it sometimes helps to have the head in there as well.
Yeah, I know. So I've heard it often said, if somebody has leased a premises or they're in business and they feel as if, look, I'm just handing back the keys and I'm walking away from it, but it's a completely different situation when you're talking about your home.
It is, and again, the legislation that is out there, you kind of forego some of your protection by doing this, and that's the important thing to remember, is that you have rights, you have protection. It's not a case that a bank can just come in and kick you out, and if that's the case, then why would you make your future situation worse? Because people think, oh, if a house gets repossessed, should we have to put them automatically on social housing? That also might not be the case, because you could have someone that can't afford a £3,000 mortgage, but they can't afford to rent for $1,200.
And that's what they'll have to do.
They may, but you see, if you abandon the property, that judgment is definitely going to go against you, and you won't even be able to use various legislation that's coming down the line to protect you from that add-on amount. So what you're doing is you're kind of leaving yourself wide open, and there's just no point in leaving yourself wide open if you could take some simple steps to avoid it. It's kind of reckless, and that's what I'm trying to say.
Simple steps?
Well, if you can't pay your mortgage, the first thing is always call your bank. There's a load of rules and regulations and laws in there. They have to deal with you fairly, sympathetically. They can't hound you. They've got to give you alternative payment plans. There's new legislation came in last week which is going to enhance and increase that. If you think that you can't pay it long term, they're meant to be giving these longer term restructuring deals, but even with that, if you couldn't, you could say, can I sell it? And even if you have to sell at a loss, come up with some sort of plan. If that plan doesn't work, you can then opt for the likes of personal insolvency. You know, and again, you might not even have to go that far, because there could be something further down, like debt settlement arrangements, where you sell your property, you have this additional amount left over, and instead of going for personal insolvency, which is normally for people with a mortgage, now you're mortgaged without a mortgage, but you've got this debt left over, that you deal with it through a debt settlement arrangement. Excuse me, that's I think it's section 69 of the new legislation. So there's lots of things out there that can help. The one thing that doesn't help is to just get outraged, throw back the keys and
do it.
And right off into the ditch.
And abandon ship, as it were. One of the points that came across with this mortgage arrears plan was the idea of the split mortgage, that you have an A amount and a B amount, and you shelve half of it and pay what you can. Tell us how that works.
It sounds so lovely. Like Claire just says that, and it just sounds like a great plan.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. What I would say,
parts of a pie.
This is a complex area, but things like split mortgages, they appeal at first to the mind. Like, you'd logically say, do you think that makes sense? I mean, you do. You say, yeah, shelve it. But what you don't realise, for instance, is you take a 30-year mortgage that's on a tracker rate at the moment, and you cut it in half. Let's just say that you chop it right down the middle. Well, the part A has to be on capital and interest. Okay, you've got to be repaying that. That's one of the conditions. That will cost you probably about $550 a month, whereas the $300,000 on interest only is only costing about $500 a month. So actually, the split mortgage is more expensive, and the warehouse part can be getting interest added onto it. So your loan is going the wrong way. It's going up instead of down. So these ideas, like, sometimes they sound great.
Be the solution.
So the idea is a good idea, but the problem is the way in which the banks are enforcing that idea. Shouldn't there be more pressure then from the central bank on this, for banks to do it and do it fairly?
You see, it's a good idea in the fact that it's logically appealing. What I'm saying is that in practice, it doesn't actually do what is suggested, unless that hived off portion is very, very large. And because of that, what you're going to do is you're going to see the people that do go for it probably have to get large amounts of their mortgage put into the Part B. But if that Part B is adding interest, and the only bank that isn't going to be adding interest is AIB because they're state-owned and got bullied into it, then you're actually going to end up potentially worse off. The big thing is, you've got to look at each one and find something that's appropriate for each one. And we have avoided dealing with this for so long that we've got, 100,000 of these to get through. And that doesn't include all the other people that needed some kind of restructure already. And I suspect what's coming down the line will be massive interest only.
But I imagine, aren't the banks under pressure now to come up with solutions for distressed homeowners to help them out at this point? I mean, we've heard it from the central bank, the pressure is really on, but don't they have to come up with viable solutions here now?
They're meant to. And certainly what I would say the critique is that all these targets that they were set last week, that's actually based on their offers. So, I mean, imagine if I gave anyone a target saying you've got to make all these offers, 20% of whatever group of people you deal with have to get offers. Well, those offers could be no good. They might be something that the person getting the offer doesn't like. Like, there's no target on acceptances until into next year. So they could just put out lots of wishy-washy offers.
Standard letters.
And the point is, when you actually get down to the cost, you might find that putting someone on interest only for 5 years is actually cheaper than the split mortgage idea. You might find that something that we're all saying, no, that's no good, that idea isn't the way to do it, in retrospect is. And that's why I'm saying it's so complex, because there's some houses that, they're never going to get paid. Should you maximise someone's tenure in a property they can't afford? Or should you maybe let a new couple who want to buy a house and start a family move in there? It's just something it's a minefield. So I suspect this is going to roll and roll for some time to come.
Okay, but throwing the keys back ain't the option. And now, of course, the banks have to get into dialogue with people. So go and talk.
Take advantage.
Yeah. No, my luck anyway. If I was to throw the keys through the letterbox, I'd probably realise the car keys were still on it.
What are you going to do then?
Yeah, exactly.
Awkward.
Okay. Anyway, that's when you call the locksmith. Carl, nice to see you again.
Thanks, Carl. Now, you at home may have a story for us on the show. If you do, here's how to get in touch.
If you've got a story you'd like to share,